Thank you so much for watching. Joe Hildebrand, you can read him in lots of different places, skynews.com.au, Daily Telegraph, but more importantly, see his beautiful face here.
That's right.
And the equally lovely face is none other than Hollie Hughes with a wonderful new set of specs. I like them.
I know.
It's very fashionable.
Very grown up.
Very, very almost teal of you, but it's not teal. All right, we're going to do this really quickly because we've done so much of it already tonight, right? Joe, what do you think of what happened today?
I think it's a shame because I think I'm actually genuinely just sad because I think Peter Dutton is a decent man and I think he has blown himself up. I think he's blown the Liberal Party up and I think this is the end of them.
Why is that not the case, Hollie?
Because I think this for us is not about ideology. This is about making sure that the details are right. And I think there's a lot of questions. And the questions are coming from people who are big voice supporters like Greg Craven. The Attorney-General himself has acknowledged that the current wording would potentially land in the High Court. So this isn't about saying no to constitutional recognition. This is about saying no to what the Prime Minister is now proposing as the wording. We're still in a committee phase. There's 6 weeks or 5 weeks to go of that.
You've come out and said no before that process.
Well, what we've said is that as it stands, it's a no. We will make amendments.
Right.
So it will still come back to the Parliament and we will make amendments.
Which is, by the way, I just want to point out to people about some of the very finely tuned
it's very
maths in the
technical
Senate.
machinery of government stuff too.
But still important to know, right? Remember, Albo doesn't have a majority in the Senate, needs all of the Greens, plus he needs 3 more after Lydia Thorpe moved across to the crossbench. They've got Pocock, whether Lambie backs it or not, as best as I could read, still up in the air. But then conversely, any attempt to change things, well, you would need all of the crossbench plus Thorpe, and Thorpe most likely wouldn't back anything in, so is no one going to get what they want here? We'll all wait and see in the next little while. All right, let's move on. Not because there's not a lot to talk about on that, but there's been a lot of talk about that.
You just had my boss on, so that's okay.
Thank you. All right, now, so what about the former Defence Force boss who says that climate is a bigger worry than China? I think we all believe that both are serious issues, but let's be honest. From a defence perspective, does honestly anyone believe that climate change is about to start building islands? Isn't climate change supposed to be taking islands?
It's a ridiculous thing to say and it's a ridiculous comparison to make. The idea that a long-term chronic issue like climate change, which may indirectly cause, for example, population movements, which could elevate tensions between countries, that could therefore, after X, X, Y and Z, result in a conflict, that is the same thing as China's capacity to push a button tomorrow and decide to invade Taiwan or whatever, which I also think is quite unlikely. But one is a long-term chronic problem, the other is a very short-term acute problem. So I find it deeply troubling that a very senior military leader would conflate the two. It's like conflating strategy and tactics, right?
Literally suggesting that nuclear war is the only thing worse.
But also suggesting that, the Russian Revolution started because of a famine. I mean, that is the most stupid, simplistic, indirect explanation for the Russian Revolution I have ever heard in my life. I mean, there was famine in Russia for about 100 bloody years before the Russian Revolution came along. Make it 1,000. There was always famine in Russia because it had a horrible totalitarian feudal system. The reason, and if you want to make the difference between the chronic and the acute, the reason why there was a Russian Revolution is because as Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was a monster totalitarian himself, decided that he'd make the communists his allies and ship Vladimir Lenin from Switzerland to Moscow, where he could actually wait until the Tsar had already resigned,
but it sounds
have a provisional government, and then overthrow that, including socialists who weren't socialist enough for him, and then slaughtered everyone in a giant civil war between red and whites, in which millions and millions and millions of people were killed. That wasn't the famine. That wasn't climate change.
Good point. I mean, Hollie, we know that anyone of a certain stripe wants to put all their efforts into doing as much as possible on climate change. I always sort of think that perhaps, the emergency services people might be probably about as far as I want to go with somebody jumping outside of their lane. But what do you think of this? And again, what Joe says, which is a pretty simplistic, emotional way of basically getting people to agree at a dinner party who don't know what Joe just told us.
No, I think, any of us who've got kids studying modern history in high school should now listen to Joe's diatribe.
Professor Hildebrand.
Thank you very much.
Professor Hildebrand just gave them quite the
You've all
update.
passed.
Yeah, well done, Joe.
Yes, that is the modern education system.
I thought he might have been on ChatGPT or something today, and they gave him, what was the Russian Revolution about? Was that, what you put in today, testing it out? But no, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think it's insulting to everyone. And the thing about war nowadays is it's not hand-to-hand combat. It's not what former Prime Minister Keating was talking about, the armada coming across the ocean. There is obviously missiles and guided weapon systems and those sorts of things, but it is also warfare now conducted through trade and all of those different, cyber and different ways of countries intimidating each other. And I honestly, we've had China, I think, hacked the APH system twice or something. That's a little
They've
more
got the blueprints to the ASIO building, all right?
I mean,
They're controlling Lydia Thorpe.
Well, I didn't think anyone was doing that, Joe.
He's joking. Please, I can't be bothered with the lawyers' meetings and he was joking. He's joking, Senator. All right, now, you remember how there was great outrage over the past few months about far right-wing protesters that were going to attack our parliaments around the country? Well, there was an attack on the Commonwealth Office Block today by unionists in Brisbane. And this is how polite it was.
Because this is about corporate greed. We've got Qantas making profits $1 billion. We've got CSL $2.4 billion. This is what's creating the crisis and the cost of living. Now, when we sit down and we negotiate with these greedy and they tell us they can't afford to give us a decent pay rise, we look at them in the eyes and we say, well, share your profits and share your earnings, you tired.
I'm willing to bet you a sizable amount of fake monopoly money. That's the first time you've heard that story today. Now, Joe, I think it's beholden on the Prime Minister and everyone with the union connections to come out and say, not cool, not okay.
Yep.
But I'll also bet you not a single person will ask him about it tomorrow.
Yeah, look, maybe so, maybe not. I don't know. But certainly Anthony Albanese is no friend of the militant construction union. In fact, him and John Setka have been enemies for decades. That's why it was...
Well, we all agree that's wrong, right?
Of course we agree. So it's outrageous. I would note that the State Secretary of the ETU said that it was a happy accident.
Yes, I did read that.
That glass, that window was smashed in. It's worth noting that the ETU is now exclusively run by the hard left faction. The last remaining outpost of sensibility was when it was run by the right in New South Wales. That recently changed hands just last year, I think it was. And so this is why it is so important that the left does not end up with control of the Australian Labor Party, and because we'll be seeing things like that. And you're right, they won't be condemning them because they'll be, in fact, sponsored by them.
And I agree with you completely. However, in the constitution of the Labor Party, the union movement is 50% of the say. 50% are picking the candidates, and this may well be the minor fraction of the minor fraction.
But more than 50% of the union movement is run by the right, not the left.
Has Sally McManus tweeted about this?
Because she's part of the left cabal.
This protest, though, was allegedly around the ABCC, which was the first thing the Labor government did to appease their union masters when they got elected. So I don't even know what they're protesting about, because it was apparently about the ABCC, which is gone, which is going to lead to all sorts of trouble on construction sites going forward. But we won't hear about that, and we won't get a question about that from the left-wing lovies who are, in the media sucking up to this government.
Correct. All right, Trump time, so see you later, gang. Thank you very much. Let's get into that conversation straight after the break. We'll make a bit of a Russian history voice chat. It's a busy show. We like it. Thank you so much.